Even in the shadow of tragedy, let us not lose hope. Give us eyes to see the rapid movements of mercy rushing to fill these newly wounded spaces. This comes from Every Moment Holy, Volume 2, a prayer book that is one of my absolute favorites that I go to on a very regular basis. I thought it would be an appropriate way to start our show today, Tuesday, August 29th, the day after a tragedy occurred on the campus of the University of North Carolina. Hey there, it's Isaac Schade, the host of Locked On Tar Heels podcast. We're here today with the show, but it looks a little bit different. I've been given special dispensation by the network to not do any ads or anything of that nature, but want to come in together and have some space and some time to talk. Now, I know that several of you will not want any sports conversation today, and some of you will absolutely need that sports conversation as an escape to just kind of get away for a while. Either is great with me. So here's what I'm going to tell you about today's show. For those who need the community moment to unpack some things from the events of Monday, to spend time joined together with this Locked On Tar Heels brother and sisterhood, but you're not ready for the sports yet, come on in. Join with us for the first segment where we're going to talk about things, unpack it. And then after that, you can shut this bad boy off. I totally get it and understand that. But for those of you who need the sports escape as well, I get that. Let me put it in some 9/11 terms for you. On Saturday Night Live's first show back after those attacks, the show's cold open had a bunch of New York firemen and other first responders on stage with then Mayor Rudy Giuliani. And amongst other things, including a Paul Simon performance, Mayor Giuliani said this, quote, "Having our city's institutions up and running sends a message that New York City is open for business. Saturday Night Live is one of our great NYC institutions, and that's why it's important for you to do your show tonight," end quote. Lorne Michaels, the executive producer of SNL, was on stage with Mayor Giuliani and said, "But can we be funny?" To which the reply came, "Why start now?" It was a moment of levity needed in the midst of a very heavy and poignant moment in our country's history. But after that, the show was off and running, and I never really realized just exactly how much I needed to laugh that Saturday night. And so in that same way, I hope that the rest of this show can be that for you, where we spend some community time together unpacking what happened yesterday in Chapel Hill, and then spend a little bit of time looking at some sports things. These ongoing talks of ACC expansion, which are coming up again, and then the football depth chart, which was released on Monday ahead of game week. And so again, you do what you need to do to interact with today's show. If you just want the community and you're out, be my guest. If you just want to do that and stay for the sports stuff because you need that escape, by all means. But that's what we're doing. That's the plan for today. Thank you so much for being here. All right, let's talk about Monday in Chapel Hill. There are no right words to say. There is no perfect phrase to use to make this right or fix it or change things. But again, I felt it important in a moment when this person has tried to steal a sense of our humanity, has tried to steal our community, for us to still meet together as a Locked On Tar Heels family. Now, listen, this is not something I have ever been through personally, a live active shooter moment. So I have no idea the feelings and thoughts and emotions that go into it. So I don't want to try to speak into that and to talk about it, because that is not my firsthand experience, and it would be inappropriate of me to do so. I want to say a word of thanks to those who have reached out to me directly. I actually, and a lot of you know this, but I don't actually live in or near or around Chapel Hill. So I personally was not someone who had to deal with this firsthand yesterday. I'm so grateful to the Locked On family for all those who reached out with kind words, including Locked On Gamecocks host Andrew Lyon, who will be playing in football assuming the game is still on Saturday. I'm sure many of you read Chancellor Kevin Guskiwitz's message out to the Tar Heels community. If not, that's on my Twitter. You can go read that. But amongst other things, just mention how there would be no class the rest of Monday, no class on Tuesday today. And as of the time of this recording, still no word on the name of the faculty member who lost their life. As the chancellor said in his message, that they wanted to make sure to contact next of kin first. And in some ways, I'm glad we don't know the name, but because we mourn as a community. I'm, and hear me not say that in a desensitized way. I say that in a way of, it doesn't matter. It is a loss of human life. Now, that person, who they are, their family, absolutely matters. And when we know that name, we will mourn that person in a very real way. Just a couple things for me. I feel like we so often talk about the victims only as those who are killed or those who are physically injured. And we certainly need to do that. But I want to make sure that we don't forget the people who will undoubtedly be going through the mental, the emotional toll of having experienced what they did yesterday. Just like everyone who was part of that experience, this will now be a day that has changed their lives. That they will never forget the feelings and emotions of being locked in a dorm room or a classroom or an office or wherever it is. Here's what's going to frustrate me about it. From a body count standpoint, there have certainly been far worse. And people are going to say, thank goodness there was only one death. And amen. So true. Praise God that there were not more deaths and no other reported injuries, at least as of this time. But hear me say this, that even that one life that was lost is still too many. It's so tragically unfortunate, and it doesn't have to be the way. I was so grateful for Adam Lucas, the great scribe of all Tar Heels stuff, as he always does, brilliantly and unfortunately, devastatingly capturing the events of Monday and the broken heart of the day in some words that he penned. Make sure you check those out. But the line that made me weep with sorrow the most was this. He said, quote, "My kids texted me today to find out if I was safe. My kids texted me about my safety. Do you understand how broken that is?" End quote. And I resonated with that in a very real way as someone who was the father of a second grader and a preschooler. My kids are younger than Adam's, but it's not how it should be. I read, just here's one example of a tweet I read from a professor who went through this experience in real time. Professor, and please forgive me if I mispronounce your name, Osamudia James. And she said this, quote, "One of my students efficiently took action, politely but urgently, prompting me to move everyone to a more secure location and check the locks on an adjoining classroom. I looked in their eyes and immediately realized they'd done this many, many times before. We have failed them." End quote. And as a 39-year-old man, I work at a college myself, and see the faces of these young people all the time, and it is heartbreaking. If you need someone to talk to, please reach out. I'm an ordained minister. I'm happy to talk with you if I can be someone who can listen to you or whatever. But obviously, my first encouragement to you would be to reach out to the things that the university has set up. From UNC Student Affairs, they said, quote, "To speak with someone now about an urgent emotional or mental health concern, call the CAPS 24/7 line at 919-966-3658. And then also directly from the university on Twitter, quote, "UNC will open a hotline starting at 8 a.m. Tuesday." So it's probably open right now as you're listening to or watching this, "for concerned parents, loved ones, and community members who have questions. That number is 919-918-1999. So again, please call those numbers, reach out as you need help. If you're trying to find someone to talk to or other things there in the area, please reach out to me. I don't live there again, but I know people who I can connect you with, whether it's someone of faith or just someone like a psychologist or whoever you need to talk to. We'll get you figured out. Now, just a brief athletic divergence. What are the effects for the rest of the week in terms of an athletics standpoint? Well, there are no other athletics scheduled until Thursday. There is volleyball is hosting West Virginia. Women's soccer is hosting Gardner-Webb. They're at home. And so we'll wait to see the news on those events coming up, just 48-ish hours from today, Tuesday. And then obviously there will be others all throughout the rest of the weekend, Friday, and then football kicks off their first game Saturday in Charlotte. My guess is that the football game will still go on as scheduled on Saturday, but that there will be some obviously special moments of recognition, a moment of silence, other things to recognize the school and what has happened. Now, by the time you're listening to this, there might already be word about that, but that's just my guess right now as we sit in the midst of this. Still for me right now, as I'm recording this late Monday night. I guess technically now it is Tuesday. So folks, I love you. I care for you, even if I've never met you or talked to you. But that is the humanity in it. We are brothers and sisters united by the fact that we are humans, and none of us should have to deal with such senseless, tragic things. So to those of you there in the Chapel Hill area, my thoughts and prayers and condolences go out to you. And I know that is not enough, but that's what I can do from afar, is to lift you all up. Yeah. Well, coming up, as I said, we're no ads on today's show. We're just going to keep rolling. But the next thing we want to roll into is changing now. This is the moment where if you're just tuning in for the community stuff and you're not ready to hear sports yet, love you. Thanks for being with us. Now's the time to get out of Dodge. If you're here and you're like, man, I do need the sports, I need the escape, stay with us. We're going to talk about some expansion stuff here in just a second. All right. How many times has this ACC expansion conversation stopped and started? Here we go again. This is like the fourth week of it at this point. From reports still ongoing from people like Pete Thamel from ESPN, Andrea Adelson from ESPN, Ross Dellinger from Yahoo, and others. This, to me, from what I'm reading and experiencing and talking with others, feels like the most serious of these conversations with Stanford and Cal and SMU, all three of those, where it's feeling very real this time. As you might or might not be aware, there on Monday during the day prior to the events on campus, there were reports that there would be a president's meeting of all the ACC schools on Monday night. Now, obviously, in deference and in thoughtfulness of the North Carolina community, the rest of the presidents and Commissioner Jim Phillips have postponed that meeting. As of when I'm recording this, a new meeting has yet to be rescheduled. At least specifically, it's obviously going to be rescheduled. We just don't know exactly when that will be. Very understandable given the circumstances. Keeping in mind that right now the Tar Heels are one of the four no votes, along with NC State, Florida State, and Clemson. Now, here's the thing. Thamel, in his writing and reporting about this on Monday, said that it's, quote, trending in the direction of happening based on conversations that were ongoing over last weekend. So here's what that says to me. That says to me that one of these four current no's, those ones I just mentioned, there's either some assurances that one of them has changed their mind or is leaning towards changing their mind, or that there's some other movement and things afoot that, again, all they need is one more yes, unless somebody else that's a yes changes their mind to a no, to move forward with bringing in those three schools, Stanford, Cal, and SMU. Because there's no other reason to fire this back up otherwise, unless it's like, oh man, we're going to get this done. Let's make it happen. Let's have these conversations. So somebody somewhere knows what's going on. From what Thamel says in his reporting, though, nobody really knows what school that is that might be leaning more into saying yes now. So we're going to have to wait and figure that out. Now, also, according to Thamel's reporting, Commissioner Jim Phillips spent a lot of time last week meeting individually with Florida State, with Clemson, with North Carolina, and with State to try to convince them to change their mind. Due in large part, not just because it's one more yes to make this happen, but because he'd really like to see a unanimous vote. He wants unanimity among the 15 member schools of the ACC. Remember, Notre Dame is included in this. And so, man, really interesting stuff there. Curious to see what happens when this meeting does get fired up. Several other things going on with this, several other things at play. All three of these schools would have to sign the existing grant of rights if they are allowed to come in, if they're invited in and they do end up coming in. They'll have to sign the grant of rights. All three will come in at a lesser percentage of revenue share. The proposal, at least at the current time, is Stanford and Cal at 30% of the rate of the other schools, and SMU bypassing any of it, 0% for now. Now, there are other revenue payouts that they would get, and then as the years of their membership increase in the ACC, the percentage they get would increase. But what that's going to ultimately do is create a pool of extra revenue income for the existing ACC members to hopefully help make up some of that revenue loss as compared to the Big Ten and SEC schools. Here's my question. Is it worth the short-term win of adding these schools and therefore some more money to try and catch up at least somewhat with the Big Ten and the SEC in exchange for the long-term of having two West Coast schools, Cal and Stanford, and SMU, Dallas market, that's great, in the ACC? Maybe. If the answer is yes, go bananas. Knock yourself out. Let's get them in. But if the answer is no, then this move is still a non-starter for me, plain and simple. Like if the extra money you're bringing in, and if the long-term stability of bringing in 3 new members, which is those are the two chief things: long-term stability because more members coming in, and the extra revenue added. If those two things are not worth what you're going to have to give up in terms of new travel costs, in terms of the wear and tear on students, which should be the number one consideration, and all these other considerations, then don't do it. Really curious to see what these 4 no schools do and if they agree to some changes. So in the presented model, according to Ross Dellinger's reporting, this is going to add about $55 million annually for the ACC, quote, to share via incentive pool. Now, of course, those incentives are going to be heavily based on football success incentives. If it was basketball, Carolina would be in a great spot. Now, not that they're in a bad spot because it's football incentives. It's just that we don't typically project Carolina football to do as many things from a postseason standpoint to help the conference as they do from a basketball postseason and other accolades standpoint. So there is that. Now, here's the question I ask. Why does this keep coming up? Why the urgency? Because again, remember the 2024-25 deadline has already come and gone. That was mid-August. And here we are sitting now at the end of August. Well, Dellinger talked about why that urgency right now. He says, quote, "There is some urgency here. The ACC has been exploring this 3-team expansion for 3 weeks now, and CFP commissioners meet Wednesday, tomorrow, in Dallas." Oddly enough, likely to discuss alterations to expansion of the format of the college football playoff and the revenue model of the college football playoff. Which, by the way, remember, the CFP is expanding to 12. Basically, what they're going to try to look at is 2 potential new models, because right now the model is 6+6, meaning 6 automatic qualifiers and 6 at-larges. The technical language of it is the 6 auto bids to the 6 highest ranked conference champs. As things stand when the Pac-12 is still going, obviously that's the Power 5 conference champs: ACC, Big 12, Big 10, Pac-12, SEC. That's 5. Plus that means then one group of 5 conference champ the next highest rated is guaranteed a spot in one of the 12 college football playoff rankings. Because after that, the final 6 are just given to the next 6 highest teams in the CFP final rankings, which is probably going to be power conference schools. So again, that's not to be confused with the selection committee who could just pick those 6 schools. It's all about the next 6 highest ranked in those rankings. So the easiest assumption of what the shift would be here in terms of a new format is you go instead of 6 plus 6 to 5 plus 7. If the Pac-12 goes away, you get the highest 5 conference champs as automatic qualifiers. So the remaining Power 4 conferences in one group of 5 school, and then 7 at-larges. Here's the thing. Group of 5 commissioners are going to be a hard sell on that, because if you keep it at 6 plus 6, that means that 2 group of 5 conference champs are guaranteed to get in. Just it's simple math, right? At that point, you have 4, you only have 9 FBS conferences, 4 power conferences, 5 group of 5s, right? Makes sense. Now, the other model, and this is, I think, the non-starter, is just the best 12, meaning no automatic qualifiers, just the top 12 teams in the final CFP poll would be your 12 college football playoff teams. And that's how that would go. I don't see that happening just because group of 5 is probably going to get screwed out of being in the playoff if that's the way it goes. Here's what you need to hear. Greg Sankey, who is the SEC commissioner, probably the most powerful voice in this whole thing. He's always throwing his weight around. Really wants all 3 facets of the CFP reexamined. The weighted decision-making process, certain conferences have more weight. He's going to want the SEC and Big Ten to have even more weight just because of the number of schools there, which is part of why the ACC bringing in 3 might actually be helpful, because they would match the Big Ten in number of schools at 18. He'll also want to look at the revenue distribution model as well as the format of the playoff. So we're going to keep our eyes and ears out on all of this. So ACC expansion and CFP conversations, which start on Wednesday. End of the day for me, I'm not convinced it's worth it to add these 3 teams from a purely financial standpoint. Again, if it helps secure the conference from a number of teams standpoint, which again, getting these 3 teams would get you to 18, at least in basketball. It'd be 17 in football because still no Notre Dame. And that ties you with the Big Ten. Knock yourself out. Whew, ACC expansion. The thing that just won't go away. Well, I want to wrap up today's show talking about, it was a beautiful sight on Monday morning to open my email and receive the official game week depth chart from UNC football. Got several takeaways from that, including several skill position surprises on offense. We'll talk about that in just a second. All right, I want to make some observations on this depth chart. If you haven't seen it, I'm actually going to tweet out a picture of the depth chart on Tuesday morning, so you can go look at that, follow along if you want to. I'm going to just make 5 kind of observations about things I noted. There's plenty more than that, but I want to kind of keep this short and sweet and wrap up the show. I'm not going to waste time with the obvious things. Like, we're not talking quarterback. Obviously, it's Drake May. We're not talking linebackers. Obviously, it's Cedric Gray and Powell Eccles, right? We don't need to have those conversations. But here are the ones that are interesting to me. We'll start at running back, where the top 2 listed guys are British Brooks and Omarion Hampton, listed atop the depth chart there for running backs. I mean, it's not a surprise if you've been listening to Coach Brown. You kind of expect that that's where this was headed, but let's rewind a couple months, and based on what's happening at the end of last year, I'm thinking, hey, Elijah Green and Omarion Hampton are going to be your guys. But British Brooks, man, I hate it for Elijah Green. You want to see him get a ton of snaps, and I would imagine he will. But, man, British Brooks, just think about everything he's been through. Getting to that point where at the end of 2 seasons ago, really just burst onto the scene, made a name for himself, and then had that devastating season-ending injury last year, just right before the season started. And now here he is listed at the top of the depth chart along with Omarion Hampton. They have that OR designation. So you're going to see a bunch of both of those guys. So, it's awesome. Great to see the growth in Omarion. But man, British Brooks, I just love this story and want him to have a massive, massive year. Keep in mind, if you haven't heard, George Pettaway, who's kind of buried down the depth chart with Caleb Hood, is going to be getting some reps in the slot. And also, remember, DJ Jones has gone to the other side of the football, playing in the secondary now. All right. So running backs, interesting there. It's British Brooks and Omarion Hampton listed at the top. Next, let's move to wide receiver. Literally on yesterday's show, we speculated about how things might play out if Tez Walker is indeed either we don't get any news or the appeal is denied. But now we have some specificity, and why I bring this up as an observation is I was wrong on some places, and you might have been as well. Here's a couple of those things. I said, I assume Nate McCollum is going to be starting in the slot. Nope. Kobe Paysour is listed ahead of Nate McCollum. Because I even surmised maybe we'll get the two of them together along with like JJ Jones or Gavin Blackwell or something like that. But Kobe Paysour listed as the starting slot with Nate McCollum behind him, although there is an or designation there on that. And then on the two outside receiver positions, it's Gavin Blackwell, a top one. Didn't think we'd have that. And behind Tez Walker is JJ Jones. And that's where I thought it was going to be. I thought it would be Tez and JJ and Nate McCollum. And so instead, we've got Kobe Paysour, Gavin Blackwell, and Tez Walker. So right now, it's looking like if we don't get any Tez Walker news or we get bad Tez Walker news, it'll be Kobe Paysour, Gavin Blackwell, and JJ Jones as your starting three receivers. Obviously, we're going to mix in other guys. Green and Christian Hamilton, the freshman, is going to get some burn, it sounds like, which is awesome, getting these young guys up and going already. Moving on to tight end. The surprise here, Bryson Nesbitt, third on the depth chart. Now, obviously, same kind of thing. If you've been paying attention, John Copenhaver, man, has been coming up. It's kind of a reverse of last year where you think about Kamari Morales and Bryson Nesbitt, as your starting guys. And then Copenhaver would be, your top two guys, and then Copenhaver in third. But here we go. Copenhaver first, Nesbitt second, and you've got Nesbitt third. I mean, I don't know if that says something about his blocking or inability or lack of doing it, because from everything we talk about and say and hear from the coaching staff, he is the one from a skills standpoint, specialty skills with the best NFL or next level potential. But man, if you don't do what you need to do to make this offense go, here comes Copenhaver, here comes Morales. So going to be interested to see how that all plays out. Next, right guard, Willie Lampkin is your starter ahead of Jonathan Adorno and Zach Rice. But the surprise to me is not necessarily Lampkin. It's more that Ed Monolith is the starter, listed as the starter atop the left guard depth chart. Where, as I'm been assuming, it'll be Willie Lampkin and Adorno. It's Willie Lampkin and Ed Monolith with Adorno behind Lampkin on the depth chart. So we'll watch that offensive line, see what happens and how all that comes together. Now, last of my 5 observations is looking at the secondary. Thing with the secondary is this. Obviously, they are banged up. We know some guys are unavailable already, like Legend Cavazos. But DJ Jones is second on the depth chart at star after his switch from running back. We just talked about that. That's pretty crazy. And that matters because if Boykins is out, is Jones your starter at star? We just don't know what Boykins' status is going to be. So we're going to have to watch that listed atop the depth chart right now. But is that just, hey, we don't want to tell South Carolina anything yet? Same thing with Don Chapman. Is he going to be ready to go? If he can't, probably Stick Lane, Derek Allen, both listed as next behind him with that ever-present or designation. So going to keep our eyes on both the injury report in the secondary and then who's actually out there. What I always like to do right at the beginning of a game, if I'm watching it, just pause it and just check out the numbers and see who we're actually getting to start the game. That's always an interesting exercise. So you can do that with me. All right, folks, that brings us to the end of the show. Again, thank you for being here. Thank you for coming together as a community. I hope it's been both cathartic to talk about the events of yesterday and some takeaways, but also to get a little escape back into the sports world. And if I can be that in some small way for you, then I'm glad to have been able to connect. I hope that you have a good and blessed day. May you be safe. May you be at peace. We'll talk again tomorrow. Coach Pat Kilby will be with us. Hey, folks, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk on Wednesday. And until then, peace out.